So we're back again with what we promised, how to make this work. What we're talking about is leading when you're not there. And the way it works is by having a strong culture. Because you're not there to watch over things. There's no other way to watch over them. The only way that things are going to move ahead is that the people that you left the responsibility with have that culture. They're going to take it in the right direction. So what we want to talk about today is how did we get that? You know, where did we get that? And we talk a lot about the 10 tenets of victory. When we look at a lot of churches, you know, even in the victory movement, there hasn't been an emphasis on the 10 tenets. Some places they don't even know about them.
Right.
And I remember back in the day that Doctors George and Hazel had the 10 tenets. It was very important. And I can remember them like really trying to get everybody on board with the 10 tenets. I think people didn't get on board if they didn't think they needed them.
Yeah, right.
Right? If you don't understand. So if we'd have backed up and said, you know what, we got to build the culture. The culture trumps the vision. But that was never communicated, and nobody really figured it out until we, in Asia, for us anyway, we really, really needed it.
Yeah.
Because we were stuck. And so when I think about, okay, so how did we connect with the 10 tenets of victory? Well, we were in a desperate situation. We were in a desperate place, trying to lead without a culture.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to lead by trusting that everybody that you're leading has the culture. They don't have the culture. It's got to be trained and imparted and communicated. And so then that's when we began to take the 10 tenets and go through them one by one, and we teach them pretty well every year. They're all across Asia. And the idea of it is that we've got a tenet, God is our source. But then we have to dig deep and say, well, what does that mean in your life? God is your source. How does that going to make you act?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to quit begging, right? There's all kinds of things that are going to come out of that.
Yeah.
So that whole thing, the 10 tenets of victory became, well, a couple of things. It became the core values and a place to start communicating the culture. I mean, they're just basically a scriptural
Principles.
principles, definition of what Jesus would do with his disciples, right? We found that when we started to do that, a culture started growing where, in fact, people were leading in the same direction.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things you shared a while ago was that asking, you know, like different leaders who are their up and coming generations, you know, and the answers that you got were, well, people in our church, and mostly are people that, you know, are in our Bible school or whatever. And then thinking about that, but really, will they follow you anywhere?
Are they connected to you in relationship and purpose and in vision? Do they allow you to speak into their life? And are they obedient to say yes to things when you've, you know, asked them to do things? We think because, especially in our area in Stereotype, because we do a lot of teaching either through the Bible school or through the church or through Victory Worship or whatever, there's a lot of impartation that happens. We think because we're teaching that we're automatically building leaders. But unless you have a relationship with that person where they're committed and they've made that decision that I will follow you, then you're not actually making a disciple. You're giving information. And you know, there's so much information out there already. The difference is when you're partnered with somebody who's trying to bring out the best in you, somebody who's going to speak into the issues that need to be corrected, somebody that's going to challenge you, somebody that's going to make you bolder in your faith and make you do things, you know, lead in areas that you don't want to. That's where discipleship actually happens. And so I think when we're talking about even the 10 tenets, building that culture, you actually have to have relationship with people far beyond. I mentor you, I teach you on Sunday, I have a you know, home group with you.
That's so true.
You actually have to be in their lives.
One of our first trips to the Philippines, Pastor Rich was just kind of coming on board with the Victory Asia church planting. We're going to do something together, and he's kind of like, we've got to train leaders. We've got to train leaders. We've got to disciple. We've got to raise up a new, because you know at that point they had a few small churches. Well, how are you going to grow? You're going to have leaders. How are you going to grow your church? You're going to have leaders. How are you going to plant the next church? You're going to have leaders. And so Rich is kind of like, how are we going to do this? And I can remember having a leadership meeting with the pastors, and I said, I want you to write down the names of the people that you're actually mentoring. Guys that if I ask them, they'll tell me, yes, he is mentoring me, right? If they don't know you're mentoring them, you ain't mentoring them.
Mystery mentorship.
Yeah, secret mentorship. But the issue is, Becky, that is so much work. Mentoring somebody is a huge
Yes.
commitment.
Yes, and it seems to never end.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But there's so much fruit that comes out of it. And then the best thing is when the people that you've actually poured your life into begin to pour their life into somebody else. And then you begin to see the multiplication. It's such a slow process at first, but that's the only way that you get to the multiplication stage.
Right. That's right. So let's talk about the core values,
Okay.
the 10 tenets particularly. And the first thing that we have to understand is you as a leader may have these values just in your heart, right? But you can't push them down to the next level of leadership or push them down to anybody. You have to exemplify them.
Model it.
You have to model them. You have to mentor them into people's lives. And that's a huge thing. We've actually got to, you say, well, what am I mentoring them? Well, start with the 10 tenets, right? This is how we live our lives. And, reach, teach, and mobilize. I mean, man, there's enough direction in there to give us a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing with the cultural values, with the 10 tenets. What we found, and this is how I discovered the value of them, was that the culture, we say that culture trumps vision. Culture also trumps whatever your leaders say. And you can tell people one thing or to do one thing. If they don't have it in their heart, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's where the culture has to be mentored and imparted into people's lives. And in that sense, I think we kind of imparted it to ourselves. And the reason was because we saw stuff happening in the Victory Church movement, like we'll see everywhere,
Yeah.
that didn't align with the vision. And so you look at that through the lens of the 10 tenets, and you can quickly understand, is this a yes or a no? Is this something that we do or something we don't do? And for all of us, we can easily get off track of what we initially intended to do,
Yeah.
right? Church planting movements become church maintaining movements. Well, we don't maintain, we grow, right? And if you look at a lot of the areas in the world of Victory churches, it's a maintaining position right now. And where is the growth? So see, we refuse to do that. We refuse to get into a maintenance thing. Well, to do that, you have to keep imparting that. You've got to keep modeling it, like you say. You've got to keep, like, this is what I'm doing. Are you coming?
Yeah. And I think, too, the other thing is because there's a lot of other information out there that we're trying to train people, And I remember doing a book with our guys. And when you're doing any kind of leadership training, always tie it back to the 10 tenet principles, right? Doing the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership with your cell group or whatever.
Right.
Tie it back to the 10 tenets. Make it the thing that you compare everything else to, because that's where the standard is, right? And that's where the value system is. And I think as well, too, it's easy for us to build programs to draw in people, but we actually need to shift the way that we do our programs in church. We're not putting on a leadership program just to have anybody come. We're putting on a leadership program for those specific people that we're training for a specific purpose, you know? And I think sometimes we think if we have the right program, we'll draw the right people. But in reality, we have to be working on the right people.
Right.
And the peripheral stuff is whatever, Like if you have 3 leaders that you're pouring your life into, and you've got them committed to you, tied to you, you're able to speak into their life, and they're moving ahead, that's going to be more effective than a home group with 20 people that just attend, right? So I think a lot of times as leaders, it's easy to put the value on where the numbers are, but we actually have to put the value on where the people we're leading are.
Right.
Who is the person? And if we don't have that person, like who's the person that we're raising up to take over the kids ministry? Who's the person that we're raising up to take over the preaching in the church or whatever it is? If we're not training them specifically for that, then it's going to be hard for them to walk in that call. I think sometimes our mentorship is vague.
Yes.
And so what it produces in people's lives is a little bit vague.
So let's clarify. One of the things I always tell the students this is that I don't believe in Bible school. Right?
Which is helpful when you run a Bible school.
That's right. Well, because
But there's a point.
There is a really
Yeah.
important point, because so many times you have a Bible college and it's successful, and the Bible college becomes the be all end all, and that becomes the focus, where it's not. The Bible college, the youth conference, the summit, the worship concert, whatever it is, those are secondary, and those are excuses or infrastructure or methods for actually mentoring the people that Becky's talking about,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the ways you can tell is, are you willing to change, quit, move any of those projects or programs that you're doing for the sake of more mentoring input into
Yeah.
people's lives. And when a project or program like that becomes stale, man, and people don't quit it, they don't shut it down. It's really hard to pull the trigger on,
It's very
put a
hard.
bullet in its head, because it was so special, and it's holy,
And it's familiar.
Yeah,
It's
familiar,
actually
that's right.
easier in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
when I started VABC back in the day, from the onset, I thought, you know what? We're going to do this for 7 years. And then we're going to change it into something else. We're going to see what God says. Well, it lasted a lot longer than 7 years. But the fact is that the heart was there, that God, if this is fulfilled its mandate, which was to train national leaders from all the nations, right? And I thought 7 years, right, would do that. But then the leaders started sending their leaders because they wanted the same training, which is really good. And I hadn't thought of that, so we continue on. But I thought at any moment we could change the whole thing into a missions training school
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, I don't care.
And we actually have that talk almost every year, right? How is
Right.
VBC this year going to look different than next year? Because we are not plugging people into a program. We are building leaders. We are making leaders. So however the program needs to change in order to be effective, that's what we need to do. We've talked about moving the school. So like 2 months it's in another country, or just
Right.
instead of changing our Bachelor of Ministry program, instead of having people come up with a new missions outreach or something like that, that they actually travel to our churches and spend a couple months with each church.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ideas that we're always throwing around, because the goal is to make leaders. What is the most effective way that we're going to make leaders? And the second something becomes predictable and monotonous, even good people in a predictable system will get bored with that system.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to reinvent for the purpose of excitement or for the purpose of engagement. We're always looking to fix and reinvent for the purpose of effectiveness.
That's
And
it, yeah.
one of the easiest ways you can tell if you're effective in actually making leaders is when you have a need, is there somebody there to fill it? Right?
Good.
When you need a photographer, do you have somebody ready to go?
Right.
If you don't, then you haven't made a photographer,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
If you
right.
need a
That's so
graphic
true.
arts designer and there's nobody there, then you haven't actually made that leader. If you need somebody to step in for worship and they're not there, then you actually haven't trained somebody. So the question isn't how many people are coming to my home group, how many people are coming to my leadership class. It's how many people do I have available to step in and fill roles when I need it, and
Yeah.
how many people are doing that.
So the primary focus is not all of those things, the Bible schools, all they're wonderful.
They're great, yeah.
But the primary focus is mentoring leaders. We make leaders. Reach them, teach them, mobilize them. And so with that as the primary focus, as long as we always keep that primary focus, we can use the culture, the 10 tenets, or whatever values you have. They're pretty well all the same anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
You use those values as the springboard to communicate what the real heart is, and you impart that heart into the people that you're mentoring and the people that you're raising up. And the rest of it, all of the secondary stuff, guys, keep it secondary. Don't let it move into place, because what happens is, if you let the Bible colleges and the summit and the worship, all those move into first place, you become a maintenance focused ministry. And one of our tenets is we
don't do
grow.
maintenance.
We don't do maintenance.
Yeah.
Well, we look after stuff, but
It's true. Don't let things fall apart, but the point isn't to keep things as they are.
Right.
The point is to grow and to increase, because the thing is, God always increases. Like, there's nothing that he creates that doesn't increase or isn't fruitful or doesn't multiply, right? So it's just a principle of like kingdom living, kingdom life is whatever we do has to be multiplied in a multiplication.
So the standard that we're talking about when it comes to making leaders, Jesus went up on the mountain, he prayed all night with his 70 disciples, and then he called 12 and he named them as apostles. And so what we're doing is we're looking for people that are willing to be named by us, right? To be mentored for a mentorship. And then Jesus said, follow me. And they followed him everywhere, right? And until he left and they took over. And so that's really what we're looking at. And he said that when a disciple is fully trained, he'll be like his teacher. He'll be able to do everything that his teacher does. And this was the model that Jesus gave. He didn't, all of the other stuff, even the healing, the miracles and all that kind of stuff, that was part of mentoring and training. Not only those disciples, but us, right? These signs shall you do. Greater works than these will you do. These signs will follow those who believe. That's Jesus' idea about you and I, is that he wants to mentor us through his word to be the leader that he's called us to be.
Amen.